Welcome everyone this afternoon. This session, cat talk apparently, is Indigenous Holistic Practices Part 2, the Medicine Wheel. I just did on Tuesday an introduction to the sharing circle. So this is a continuation in that because I cover 5 different areas over the next little while. This is brought to you by ARPDC, which is Alberta Regional Professional Development Consortium, and I'm under the ERLC, another acronym, the Edmonton Regional Learning Consortium. And we are funded by Learn Alberta. There you go. Like do land acknowledgement when I start. So Tanse, I live on Treaty 7 land, which is ancestral home of the Blackfoot people. There are also Dene people here in Métis Nation number 3, which I belong to. I also belong to the Manitoba Métis Federation. If you do know the treaty number that you're living on, or settlement you're close to, or land, people whose land that they're displaced upon that you're living on now, or your school is, you could always put that in the chat if you'd like. And I always thank the Blackfoot people for allowing me to live on their land as well, because I have a home here and they're sharing that with me. Norm says Treaty 7 also. You're closer to me, or you're in Calgary as well, possibly. So who am I? If you haven't been to one of my presentations before, if you have, bear with me because you'll have heard this a few times, but I try to make it brief. Under ARPDC, we're now called Designers of Professional Learning, which I do love that title. A lot of times, those acronyms are kind of, look at them, you're like, oh, what does that mean? But it actually encompasses everything that we do. Besides presenting online, we all present face-to-face as well, doing workshops or presentations like this one. Also creating curriculum and doing a lot of collaborations in terms of talking within the 7 different regions, and how can we deliver information best to everyone in the province. So it's really exciting to be able to do that work now with everyone. I am Red River Métis, which is what Louis Riel called us, what was known historically as a Red River settlement. And for those of you who are Métis possibly that are attending, or if you don't know, we all identify ourselves by our family surnames, and our family surnames are all European because we are mixed and took would have been our my case, the Mowats was my great-great-great-grandfather. And then there's also McDonald's, Mackays, and Beaudry's as the main 4 families. My mom's a Mowat. That is a picture there of my great-grandpa sitting on the bench by the rocks there, James Mowat. And in Fort Saskatchewan, there's James Mowat Elementary named after him, as well as Mowat Park. And then at Edmonton, there's James Mowat Trail, and it's spelled with 2 T's. But like I always say, it doesn't matter because the name is spelled M-O-A-D, still pronounced Mowat or Mowat, with a Scottish accent, but the English didn't understand them. Anyway, those are his surviving children. My grandpa was the middle boy there, Rosser, and my uncle Stanley and Oliver and great aunt Tassie. And yeah, I think that picture was taken probably around 1916. My grandpa's probably around 6 years old then, and the picture of my great grandpa is somewhere in the late 1800s there. So I think those are pretty cool pictures myself. I was glad that I have them. I am originally from that area. My family's from Selkirk, Manitoba, but I went to school in Winnipeg and lived there with my mom during this school times. I was in Selkirk all my holidays and most of my weekends growing up. And how I got to this work, well, I've always worked with other Indigenous. Well, I was the adult, they were the kids, right, as a teacher. But since I started working, because even though I was in Winnipeg and the high population of Indigenous students, there weren't a lot of Indigenous teachers, and the majority of us that were there were Métis, and a lot of us being Métis didn't admit to it. I always did because I always knew, but it wasn't something that people in that area talk about a lot, just because of the conflicts and things like that happened there with the dark times and people hiding themselves. And yeah, but anyway, so I ended up doing a project with Kataskanal Tribal Council and Ignite eLearning Online to take their grade 7 to 9 outreach program curriculum. I indigenized it for their particular cultures there, decolonized it, added land-based learning and the Cree language. And I worked with their specialists. So I didn't do that just on my own. I had lots of great help in terms of consultation. And then the elders took that work and they were really happy with what I did and how that would affect their students. And so I was just really encouraged to continue on doing this work. So I do take curriculum for different places. Right now I'm working on something for Bow Valley College, and I do different contracts. I've had work with the Edmonton SPCA to take their 7 grandfather teachings that they wanted to work on. And I consulted on that to make sure that they were covering it properly and adding information to that they didn't have. So that was exciting for me to do that. So yeah, and really important for me is to help you guys. So I know that it can be a daunting task to, especially as a non-Indigenous teacher, to take the curriculum and take the work that you're doing and try to honor Indigenous ways of knowing and being, and how do you do it, and make sure you're not appropriating or you're not disrespecting, all that stuff. And so I really applaud everyone who shows up to these sessions, because it means that you're working on that, and that's part of reconciliation as well. So I think that's super important. I do want to just show you the ARPDC resources that are available for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit that are already created, because there's tons of stuff here and it's amazing and it's really good. So if you're looking for something, it's always a good place to start to give you some ideas. I'm going to go first to the trending resources. The Empowering the Spirit is probably one that you know about, and I know that even the universities for the Bachelor of Education programs use this as well. So yeah, as you can see, there's some really good stuff on here, and it's divided between foundational knowledge, leading the learning, and classroom supports. And there's a lot of really good stuff on here in terms of, like, if you click on any of them, there's information, particularly at the top here, this Orange Shirt Day and beyond. So there are a lot of teaching tools on here. For instance, there are some excellent posters made for sharing circles, which I talked about last time. And there are posters you can print off for each division and each grade level, so that if you want to start something like that, you just have to put that up on your wall basically and teach the kids the protocols. So it's really cool. The other part of this is, if you want to find resources for First Nations, Métis, Inuit specifically, you can just go to Find Resources by Focus. And you'll notice that it's broken into focus, audience, level, and type. But if I go to Focus and I just want to find all of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit resources, I can do this. And as you can see, there's a lot. So there's quite a few that have been developed. And I also know that the people who are in charge of the French programs here en français are also working on getting all these translated into French. Yeah, perfect. In the chat there. And then the audio, you can search by audience. So if you want to, go that way, or you can go by level. And then there's type, so what's available. So if you want to narrow it down even more. And you can also search by the TQS. So I did a session in September about the TQS. And if you've got that on your plan this year, you can always search for that. It'll give you some ideas as well. And then, of course, the en français. There, so I just like to show everybody that stuff, because it's already done, and it's done by Alberta educators as well. So, it's local. It's always good to use local stuff. So get into the nitty gritty then of this, these sessions that I'm doing on this series. So what I've done is I've come up with, over last year, really 5 areas in which I believe, with Indigenous ways of knowing and being, that teachers can integrate into their teachings and their schools, period. Like, schools could take all of these at any grade level and fit them into what you're doing. And I don't want to say, that's the wrong wording, because you can't just fit Indigenous ways of knowing into what you're doing, but however, there are things that you can access and you can utilize and have kind of overriding themes as well in your classroom. And the first one I said is the sharing circle. Today I'm working on the medicine wheel. The other part of it is, if you attend all of them, you'll notice is that you can't separate them. Just like the wheel itself, you can't separate us, right? Like, you can't. And as Indigenous ways of knowing and being, you can't take one thing and separate it from the other anyway. So I'm doing my best that I can to teach them as separate topics, but there's always going to be overlap, and there should be, right? Because everything is interconnected. So it's really important to understand that. Later, I'm going to be doing one on the 7 grandfather teachings, and then land-based learning and storytelling. So I'm going to just start off first. If you don't know much about the medicine wheel, you've probably seen them. I mean, even when I've gone, when I've been in a waiting room in a doctor's office, I sometimes have seen, a copy of the Alberta Health Services one on the wall. They have one that's specific to Indigenous peoples, particularly in, there's a couple of wellness centers downtown for Indigenous people, and they have them on the wall there to explain things, but also just in general health. It's really important. So if you look at the one that I've got here, this is actually from Bob Joseph's website, and I'm going to show you his website in a moment. He's the one who wrote 21 Things You Should Know About the Indian Act. And he has a consulting company in Ontario, which he uses to help different corporations, companies, and people in government to navigate how to properly conduct business with Indigenous peoples, and tries to help them to understand different issues. So I want to confirm right here that this is a very generic medicine wheel. And today that's what we're going to focus on. I'm not focusing on any specific teachings. What I mean by that is every cultural group of Indigenous people and I'm going to say in Canada at least, have adopted this. It's used by many different people and peoples, I should say. And then how to explain this, the best way to explain it. So for instance, when I was working with Kataskanal Tribal Council, they have 5 nations that were together to form their tribal council for their education division. And 3 of them would have been closely aligned to their beliefs and teachings on the medicine wheel. And then 2 of them would have been very different. And the reason they were very different would be because the other 2 were very heavily Christian focused Catholic. And so how they went about it would be very different. The other 3 would have been much more traditional, plus aligned with their particular Cree and their Woodland Cree people in their area. You could go to another area, particularly even Alberta, even a few miles away, and their teachings could possibly be a bit different. If you go to Saskatchewan or Manitoba and you go to different places, again, their teachings are going to be a little bit different. And what I always say to people when I explain something that I have learned, and you'll probably hear any Indigenous person say this is what I have been taught by my elder, or this is what I learned from this elder. And it doesn't mean you pick and choose who you learn from. It just means that if that happens to be the culture you grew up in and that's what you learned, or if you have been part of a particular group or an elder that's been teaching, that's what you've learned and that's what you've learned to practice. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not good or bad. It's just the way it is. Think of it as different churches you may go to as well. There might be slightly different, bent on a particular verse or something like that, right? Everybody has a little bit different way of doing it. So it's kind of the same idea. So I'm going to take you to this website. I don't want to belabor that issue, but just so that you're clear and you understand that at least. So this is, like I said, his website. And he does have, a little bit of information on here. But just, talking about this circle and I'm going to show you this video. It's very, very short. It's only a few minutes long, but he does have background noise in it. And I think it's done for effect. I find it kind of annoying myself. So I'm sorry if it bugs you a little bit, but this does a great way of explaining this.
Hi, I wanted to start off this video about medicine wheels with a quote from J. Dumont's Culture, Behavior, and the Identity of the Native Person. The circle, being primary, influence how we as Aboriginal peoples view the world. In the process of how life evolves, how the natural world grows and works together, how all things are connected, and how all things move toward their destiny. Aboriginal people see and respond to the world in a circular fashion and are influenced by the examples of circles in creation in our environment. There isn't a simple answer to the question, as medicine wheels, sometimes called hoops, come in more than one form, and their significance and use is culture-specific. There is, however, one fundamental similarity. Besides the shape, medicine wheels represent the alignment and continuous interaction of the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual realities. The circle shape represents the interconnectivity of all aspects of one's being, including the connection with the natural world. Medicine wheels are frequently believed to be the circle of awareness of the individual self, the circle of knowledge that provides the power we each have over our own lives. Two images jump to mind when thinking about medicine wheels. One is the ancient stone version. According to the Royal Alberta Museum, a medicine wheel consists of at least two of the following three trays. One, a central stone cairn. Two, one or more concentric stone circles, and or three, two or more stone lines radiating outward from a central point. Using this definition, there are a total of 46 medicine wheels in Alberta. This constitutes about 66% of all medicine wheels known. Alberta, it seems, is the core area for medicine wheels. How long ago stone medicine wheels were first created is still up for discussion, but some have been dated to about 4000 BC, which is when the great Egyptian pyramids were built. There are suggestions that the bighorn medicine wheel, the largest and oldest, could be millions of years old. The original name for medicine wheels was sacred circles. The term medicine wheel was coined by non-Native Americans in response to the bighorn medicine wheel in Wyoming, the largest in North America, and at around the turn of the previous century. The other familiar medicine wheel image is the iconic circle divided into four separately colored quadrants. The number 4 has great significance in most Aboriginal cultures. The black, white, red, and yellow medicine wheels that we frequently see in logos, on drums, in art, are all somewhat different. The one shown here is a compilation of some of the many attributes or powers that can be included in the medicine wheel. This one does not include the inner circle or the center, which is usually green and given the attributes of learning, self-balance, and beauty. Certain culturally significant animals being part of the natural world are also often included. The medicine wheels are interpreted uniquely to each culture. The order of colors is not the same in each culture, nor the attributes, and it would be wrong to make a sweeping generalization. The next time you see a medicine wheel, take a moment and think about its history and culture and significance.
There you go. So I'm just going to start with that. I think it's always a good place to start. I have a comment in the chat. I'm just going to check. Oh, okay. You'll get a copy of the slides and the Google Slides and the recording. So you'll have access to all these links too. So yeah, so I just it's a great way to sum it up because he has all the information there for you, and it's really important as well. Like he said, there's one for sure they've dated to about 4000 BC, but there's that one in Wyoming particularly they think could be millions of years old, right? So, and it's interesting because Indigenous people say they've always been here, right? So I'm Métis, my family is mixed, so the Europeans that came here married Indigenous women, and but it is interesting that when people that I know First Nations, that's what they believe, that they've always been here. So it's very interesting that they would think that about a medicine wheel. So yeah, so if you look at this, I'm going to get into a little bit more explaining to you guys. So medicine wheel teachings. I'm not gonna well, no, I might just, I'm not actually going to show you this video. I just wanted to let you know it's here. But tribal trade is a really great, I just don't have time to go through everything and watch that as well, but there is a link to that video as well. And she does go through all the teachings and breaks them all down a little bit more. And I think it's a really great video, particularly for older kids too, if you want to use that in school for the older ones. But just kind of to bring it down, all medicine wheels, because that's a generic one that I showed you that has all the things in it, right? But there's 5 areas really that encompasses everything that's similar about any of them that people use. And that's at all aspects of life connect. Like I said that to you guys, interconnectedness, the unending balance, it's really important. And again, that number 4 being a sacred number. It is a sacred number because so many things come in 4s. That sharing and organizing of knowledge. So that's a good way to organize the information and be able to talk about it and to share it with your people, is to have this visual to be able to do it. Again, that sacred number 4. And then many parts make a whole. And it's really important, especially when we talk about human beings and age and, like that baby stage in the East and then going you know, to the south and you've got, you know, your youth, and then you go to the west and you've got your adult times, and you go to your north and then you've got your, you know, your seniors type age, you know, like the elders and things like that. And but you can't have one without the other in that cycle, right? And then we all care for each other as we go through that and learn from each other, right? You can learn from a baby, the things that they're going to do, and they're, you know, as they're growing and learning, and you learn more about yourself again because things that you didn't realize, etc. So it's not just those of us that are older. So that's really important to understand. So there's, like, in that original medicine wheel that I showed you that has all the things. So there's meanings of the four different directions, and it's really important to understand. Indigenous peoples consider themselves to be directional people, but I've also heard it said that we're seven directional people. By that I mean there's the four directions on the earth pointing to the areas we go to, but there's also above, below, and right here on the earth. So there's those that also consider it seven directions, right? But for the sake of this presentation, we're talking about the four directions. And every morning when I get up, I burn sage, and I've got sweetgrass and I've got cedar. And then when I'm done with my four directions and praying, I put tobacco on top of it. So I use all four medicines. And that's a typical way to start your day from those who practice spirituality. And you know, as I do what I do, I pray to the four directions. When I go to a sweat, we do that before we go into the sweat lodge. You know, we pray to the different directions to open up those areas, call in our ancestors. You know, and there's an animal associated with each one. For me, and it's not always the same for everybody. Like for the east, it's an eagle. For the south, it's a wolf. For the west, it's a bear, and for the north, it's a white buffalo. So it really depends on who is, you know, whose teachings you've received. Like I said earlier, you know, but it can represent all these things, right? Like I said, the stages of life, the seasons of the year as well, which is represented by those colors. And I did want to mention the color thing too. Like I'll just go grab it. When I made my rattle, I was given teachings to teach about my rattle. I'm just gonna make sure I can see my camera on here. There we go. Okay, there we go. So you'll notice that instead of it being black, mine is blue, because typically Cree paint, or that we're using the blue color, not the black. So it's more typical of more the Anishinaabe or the Blackfoot that use black. So I just thought I'd let you know that. I'm gonna drop everything today. And then the other side, I just painted my Métis symbol. There you go. So yeah, if you see it with blue, it's not wrong. It's just a different group of people. And even amongst the Cree, sometimes they do black. And I don't know that there's a particular reason for it. And nobody's explained it to me yet. Maybe there's. But that also represents the ceremonial plants and animals. So as you can see, there's lots of opportunities in here once the children understand what a medicine wheel is at any age, that you can teach about a lot of these things, because you can bring in the animals for the different areas, and you could talk about even organizing the different types of animals. Like, for instance, if you've got eagle, the different birds that you have, you've got bear, wolf, buffalo, they're all different types of animals, or you could talk about that as well. And then the different medicines. And I've done that. I did that for land-based learning when I went to Fort McMurray. I did that with students outside, took them outside. We did some land-based learning outside with the teachers. I used my rattle, as a matter of fact, as I taught them the four directions. I brought the medicines and I talked about that, because those all come from the land. And, you know, yes, there's a lot of things you can do with it. So just some general ideas, right? I've given you a few already, but we're going to get into, you know, more details. But wellness, I do a separate presentation just on using the medicine wheel for wellness in a school. Classroom management, because, you know, you can use it for emotions as well. You can use it for, and I'm going to show you a teacher in Winnipeg, she's a Métis teacher as well, that used it for organizing the kids for their classroom rules, well, you know, that they created themselves. So it was really cool. We talked about nature already, the interconnectedness of everything. I think that's really important to understand, because for Indigenous peoples, even the rock, like we call, for instance, during a sweat lodge, we have grandfather rock, like we have grandparents. The rocks are our grandparents, right? The mushums and cookums, you know. So not to say that I believe the rock is a living, breathing thing, but it was created and it has life. It has a spirit still. So everything has a spirit. So that's really important to understand as well. I don't think you have to teach that to young kids. I don't think that it would be something they would understand and might take it the wrong way. But as they get older, you could teach it as, this is an Indigenous belief. Sorry to go ahead of myself. The seasons, obviously, environmental stewardship, you can do that. And then any type of interconnectedness. And again, I'm going to show you this lesson then by this Winnipeg teacher, which I love and I use it all the time. And I think she should be recognized for what she's done because it's so cool. And like I said, if you want, all the links will be in the Google Slides and you receive them. And there's a video with this, and I just don't have time to show you all the videos that are available, but that's okay. You can watch that if you'd like, because it was a news report in Winnipeg. But I do want to show you what she did work on. So what she did was she had the kids create a list of rules and codes of conduct, which very typical for things that we do, right? Yeah, no problem. And just really cool. This is a grade 4 or 5 class. And I think you can see the kids here, and obviously during COVID that they did this, but it's really cool. Just organizing it. As you can see, what she's done with the kids to make it more relevant to their age, she's changed it to mind, heart, spirit, and body. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Those are terms that kids can understand. And so I'm going to show you, here's where they brainstormed, right? And then they brainstormed and she organized it under which topic it would fall under, their rules that they wanted to have. And you guys know, if the kids choose these rules and they understand them, they're more likely to follow them, and also not police each other, but hold each other accountable, which is really important. And this is a close up. You can see the kids, right? They've done their part and they're all gluing onto this. It's really cool. They put it up in their classroom and there's their finished product. And in the article, it's really, really neat too, I thought, was, Winnipeg being a place where there's a very high population of Indigenous students, often walking into a classroom, not seeing anything that they can relate to at all, right? It's all colonial, but they can walk in and see this. And one little boy, I guess, came into the class later in the year and saw this on the wall and just felt automatically like he belonged there. And so I thought that's really cool. I think it's really important to note that, because I grew up in Winnipeg, and the only thing I knew about my people was that Louis Riel was a traitor, so therefore we must be as well. So yes, I'm old, so it was a long time ago, but it's only been about the last 15 years or so where that has changed. So wherever you can to help, obviously, all students feel connected, but particularly Indigenous students who've had, our people have had a really rough relationship with education, and however you can make that better and a joyful experience is always a good thing to do. So I also wanted to show you just some different lesson plans here. This is an interesting one that uses the medicine wheel, and just give you some examples of different ways you could do it. But this is bringing in the idea of the numbered treaties in the Indian Act. And I also think whenever you're able to teach even the young ones about numbered treaties, it's really important, because the First Nations people living under the Indian Act and having their land taken away from them, and these rules imposed upon them, is the reason why we have so many of these issues. And then the Indian Act led itself to the residential schools. And so again, it has to be developmentally appropriate always, right? I don't want anybody talking to small children. Obviously, you guys know that about some of the things that have happened. We can still refer to some of these things even when they're young and just talk about it. And I think kids themselves will note right away as soon as you tell them, if you explain to them, well, they had their homes taken away from them, they were just put in this place. They're going to think automatically, somebody took my home and took all my stuff and just made me go somewhere else, and then I couldn't speak my language, and they cut my hair, all that kind of stuff, right? I think it would hit home. They'd be thinking, wow, that's not cool. What can I do to fix this? Right? Like, how can I make this better? That's all, right? So we want to kind of plant that idea in their head of how can we make these things better in the world that have gone wrong. But here you can see this, like they've looked at the effects of numbered treaties, and it's an empathy activity, right? So just looking at how these things have gone down, and there's some videos on there as well. I've used this one as well quite often. It's a bit older there too, but in explaining the Indian Act, and of course that would be for older kids, and I think that this could be modified easily for younger ones as well. So there's that one. There's loads of ideas in this one. This PDF is really cool, especially for the younger ones. I've given you a couple of ideas that are a little bit older elementary, and then that other activity I just showed you could be modified for the younger ones, but is intended for the older ones. But this one is really neat because I think it's a PDF that's already got some ideas in it. You know, it's got the sacredness of the circle, so if you want to explain that, but it also brings in, you know, you've got some astronomy there, right? So you've got a lot of science in there too, talking about, you know, the four directions in terms of just directions, like that's part of science as well. You could learn how to do, I remember when I was in school, we did orienteering. That's always a fun thing to do too. The seasons for young ones. They've got some nice visuals in here. The plants, like I said, you know, you could talk about the medicines and bring plants into that, the plant world. And then the animal world, like I was mentioning, so you could break it down if you wanted to into legged ones, swimmers, winged ones, and crawling insects, that kind of stuff. You could do stories about trickster if you'd like, because that's in every Indigenous culture. And then just talking about all the different nations, right? You could organize them there in terms of where they live, the parts of the body in terms of Indigenous way of thinking about it, right? So we always include that spiritual component, which is really important. And spiritual doesn't have to be our spiritual practices, right? Spiritual can be, and I do this in the wellness session, can be anything. It's just, you know, recognizing that children sometimes need to slow down. Maybe they need to go sit outside and ground themselves. Maybe they need some quiet time, listen to some music, sit down with books. We all do that, especially in elementary classrooms. It's easy to forget when they get older, right? To give them that space, and that itself can be spiritual. Looking at the sacred plants, like I mentioned. And then they've just got some extra bits in here that you could use if you wanted. But they also talk about the four nations, which of course didn't exist for Indigenous peoples until Europeans arrived here, because they'd never seen anybody who was different than them, you know, because everybody on Turtle Island was pretty much homogenous in terms of color of skin, at least for the most part, right? So they've got that, but you could talk about that. Yeah. So I just thought it's kind of, they've got some examples here of things that students have done, just to give you some ideas. I just think it's a plethora of really great resources on here to give you some really great ideas if you want to go. But anyways, you can browse through that once you get the links. And then again, like I said, wellness and calm, like calm for even for grade 11. I've taught calm class before, and I think the medicine wheel fits in amazingly well with this. So this one is actually from North Dakota, and it's for a wellness program to prevent drug use or substance abuse. But I think again, like I think this can be modified obviously just for general wellness, but it talks about the gifts of each direction, which is really important, especially for those older ones. And I think you could fit this in a calm, you could fit it into even junior high. So the things that you do, right, talking about that and really getting into some of those thoughts and feelings and the emotions, which are really tough for kids to express as they get into those ages. I've mostly taught junior high, and I know I love that age because they've got so much to say, and they're, you know, and they're so honest and genuine usually, and but they're also open, right, to learning, and they're really hungry for people to talk to them and just help them through some of these things. So I just thought this is a really cool activity they list out, and then they do have the, you know, some visuals in there for you. But it does refer to you know, Native youth wellness, and talks about that. But I don't think it's just Native kids that need this. Every kid needs this, right? I think that's the cool thing about Indigenous ways of knowing and being, is that it benefits all students, right? When we talk about recognizing every part of the student, not just their academic part or not just their, you know, their mental part, we're talking about, you know, their emotional and spiritual as well, bringing that into, you know, the physical education as well as their thinking. And then I've just got something here on the pedagogy, because I always like as a teacher to have that pedagogy. I think it's important for myself, that I always ground myself in the knowledge behind what I'm doing, so that I understand what I'm teaching and I'm doing that properly as well. If I do have time in here, I may just have a little bit of time to go back and show you that one video from Tribal Trade. We'll see if I do, because it is a really good video. So this is actually referring to the Anishinaabe framework for Indigenous education, and it's based around the medicine wheel. And you may notice a lot of companies, even if you, you know, I mean, even driving around, I've seen them on the back of vans and things like that, or on people's business cards and things like that, have a medicine wheel all the time now. So, it's pretty much, and for school divisions particularly, that are Indigenous, will often have a medicine wheel to show that, because it really does represent everything that all the teachings encompass. For me, I thought this was interesting. The gifts of the four directions here for teachers to understand. So if we start in the east, right, we want to see it. So we want an awareness of what's going on. Then we want in the south to relate to it. So how do I understand? West is the knowledge, I'm figuring it out, and then north is the wisdom, so be able to do it and to go forward. So I think that's a really cool model in terms of, we talk about Bloom's taxonomy, and here it's an Indigenous taxonomy in a way, because we're talking about, I need to see it and become aware, I need to understand it, I need to figure it out, so explore it, and then once I know it, then I can do it, and I have that wisdom. So I think that's a really great way to explain it, for us as teachers. And then it just talks about, that transmission of Indigenous teachings. If I can make this bigger, I can. But that interconnectedness. So if we start in the east, right, the wholeness, we want to always remember that those students are whole. We're talking about the whole child, the whole student, right? And then we're talking about that interrelationship then. So our relationship with the student, their relationships with each other, and then our relationship with the family and the student and how that works. And then we go to that interconnectedness. So how we're all connected. So how are we all in the school connected to those families, to each other, to the kids, even to their siblings, because of what we do. Everything we do impacts them. And everything that happens with that student impacts the greater world. So when we talk about that, how does that information go out and transmit to others? And then the last in the north, we hope that through all of that, connecting all of those things and bring them together for the student, that we have balance and respect. I know there's a lot of talk in society, is balance really important, and those kinds of things in Western culture, but for Indigenous culture, balance is everything. Balance is so important, to not have those. And no, I don't mean don't express your feelings and have your emotions. Yeah, you have them and you get them out, because if you don't suppress them, it's also something we don't believe. You don't suppress your feelings, get them out. But there's ceremony to get those out. So you do that in a way, for instance, in a sweat lodge. I'll admit it. I was a puddle last Sunday. I've been going through stuff like we all do, and I was crying almost the entire time. But I let it out. I shared what I needed to share because it was a safe space. I didn't have to worry about what people thought of me or what I was going through, because everybody goes through things. I got it out and just set on that path to healing those things is really important, so that I could go into my work week on Monday feeling a balanced person, that I did deal with that. I didn't hold in that stuff. I dealt with it. And if I'm a balanced person, I can treat everybody else with respect, right? That's really important, including myself. It's really important, because if I hold a lot of stuff in, and you'll notice this with your students, right? If they hold everything in, they've got no one to talk about things with, or they can't deal with it, they're not gonna be able to do their schoolwork, because they can't focus on it. I can't focus on my work that I need to do if I'm thinking about all these emotional things, right? So we're trying to gain that. And then I'm also not going to treat other people with respect, because I'm going to be snippy and grumpy and not want to be there, right? So I think that's an important thing to know too. I also added this as well. I've been a music teacher. That's how I started off my career. I sing and I, play instruments and things like that. And I had done this for a private school in Edmonton, and I just left this one in because I love this slide. I think it's really cool. I drum. I belong to a drumming group, and on Saturday for Truth and Reconciliation Day, there was a march here in Calgary, like I know there's in all the cities, and some of my friends and I were drumming through the march with a powwow drummer. He was drumming, hand drumming as well as we walked. So we walked and we sang, and then we sang on stage later for people, and it's such a healing experience. I can't even explain this. The drum is the heartbeat of Mother Earth, right? And that's that, just connecting with that and singing at the same time. It's just such a healing experience overall, for not just us, but for the people that are around us too. And it just was like, I when we were on stage and we were singing, it just, the way that people's faces lit up and you could see that they felt it. So I think it's something that's important to understand. It's so integral when people talk about drums. All Indigenous peoples across the world have some form of drum, right? Like I have a bodhrán hanging on my wall too, because my family is, also like Scottish, mainly, and from the UK, and on that European side. And so, you know, that drum is important for them as well. The Scots were an indigenous group, the Celts were, right, as well. Um, so it's also part of my nature too, but I just like to include it because I think it's really cool because it's a it's a circle, right? Everything that we do is in a circle. But you know, just talking about that, the drum making, and the drum is a sacred tool. So if you wanted to, if you teach music, or if you wanted to bring that into your lessons and talking about that, I want to include this because I think it's an amazing visual. You know, I have my drum, and I can take that and show kids when I'm doing something, or teachers when I'm teaching a lesson. I'm going to St. Albert next in a couple weeks and doing a presentation. I will probably bring my drum and my rattle with me because you know, I think that it always comes up somehow that I can share that with them because it's so integral to the culture. It's really important to know that. And if you know anybody who drums it, you know, in your community, any of the kids or anything like that, you know, invite them in to share that with you because it's really important. And I just thought I'd show you this. It's a group I used to work with. I worked for about 12 years, Stardale Women's Group. And yeah, they did a drum making workshop with a local lady here, Chantal Gagnon. She's Métis as well. I can see her in the picture there. And she did this with the kids, and so many different ways you can do the design on the back. Mine's a pretty simple one, but there's different types. Like I have a friend who's from Northwest Territories. He's got a really, wow, it's like, I can't even, probably 24 inches across maybe or something like that. And it's very thin and it's very, I can't even explain it. It's a different sound, and he plays it with a rattle. That's their traditional way of doing it. So it's really cool. Just want to show you this as well. So the girls themselves have a drumming group, and they play at different events and things like that. It's one of the very few all-girl drumming groups around, I think, in Canada. Here in Calgary, we also have Sings Many Songs, women's group that sings too. But yeah, so like, and this quote I decided to show, this is, the girls say the drum is my medicine. So I think I'm not gonna show you that video, but I think it's really important to understand that, right? The drum is many things we refer to as medicine. For instance, laughter is medicine, babies are medicine, right? You know, little children are medicine. Anything that teaches you and is good is medicine. And so there's that little component to it. Okay, so I'm going to go back just to that one video, because I do have a few minutes. I just have enough time to show you it. I just didn't want to run out of time. But this goes over all of those particular teachings just in one nice, concise video. And I do have time, so I'm going to show you this. Sorry, it's spooling.
Why is the medicine wheel such a significant symbol in the Indigenous culture? You've seen this popular Native symbol used in so many places, but what does it really mean? Watch this video to find out what the top 5 teachings are of the medicine wheel, so you can quickly have a great understanding of what this symbol represents and the important teachings behind its existence. I'm Mallory Graham from tribaltradeco.com, where we offer over 130 different styles of contemporary Indigenous moccasins and mucklucks, as well as medicinal smudging products. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notified every time we post a brand new video, just like this one on Indigenous products, Native culture, and sacred medicines. If you are looking to find out what the real significance of the medicine wheel is to Indigenous people, then we're here to share the top 5 important teachings on the medicine wheel. This way you can confidently share this knowledge with your friends and family, as the medicine wheel teachings are fundamental to the Indigenous people of Canada and the United States. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what the medicine wheel is and the top 5 teachings that this incredible symbol represents, which explains so much of the Indigenous worldview and the meanings behind our beliefs. You've likely already seen the medicine wheel in tons of places. Many Indigenous organizations or even businesses incorporate the medicine wheel into their logo. This is because the teachings behind the medicine wheel represent the very core of our beliefs and the worldview of the Anishinaabe and Cree nations, as well as other Indigenous tribes around North America. You may have heard of many teachings surrounding the medicine wheel before. Some of them might be slightly different with many similarities, and you will soon see why. There are numerous teachings that have been shared by elders and knowledge keepers surrounding the medicine wheel. We've carefully selected our top 5 medicine wheel teachings that we hope that you will find the most helpful. The first medicine wheel teaching is the connection of all aspects of life. Whether you are referring to emotional, physical, spiritual, or intellectual aspects of your life, they are all deeply connected. Our connection to our Mother Earth and Grandmother Moon are so vital to our health and well-being on a spiritual, physical, and emotional level. Our closeness to our Mother Earth can directly affect our spiritual well-being, our hormone levels, our brain health, and so much more. All creation on Mother Earth was put here for a purpose: the water, animal, plants, and humans. And we are all connected in the circle of life, which is why all 4 sections are connected to create the full circle. These 4 sections are dependent on each other to make the full circle. And the balance of the circle depends on the connection of all parts of life. The second medicine wheel teaching is on the importance of the circle and the balance that it represents. Indigenous people of North America look to the medicine wheel as a symbol that everything flows in a circle. That is the circle of life. The circle of life means that we believe that life continues on and on in a circle. There was never really a beginning, nor is there ever really an end. Our spirits have always been here, and we live on forever. We are reborn as animals or in another spirit form. As with the renewing of the seasons and the connection of all life from number 1, life continues on and can only be explained by the circle and the meaning behind those connections. The medicine wheel represents the circle of life divided into 4 sections. The wheel speaks to the need for balance, harmony, and respect. The 4 seasons on Mother Earth and the 4 elements, earth, air, wind, and fire, all need to remain in balance. For centuries, many tribes have used this system of traditional knowledge under many different names, but many of them share the same beliefs and the same need for balance and harmony. Have you heard of any of these teachings before? Or are there any others that you would like to share with us? If yes, we would love to know in the comments below. The third medicine wheel teaching is that it is actually a tool for passing on knowledge. Traditionally, knowledge has been passed down from elders through the use of storytelling. From language to culture teachings, songs, and traditions, learning happened in an oral fashion around the fire through telling a story. That's how Indigenous people passed on knowledge from elders in their tribe to future generations. This system of teachings, that is the medicine wheel, help to connect and organize all of the teachings together. The medicine wheel naturally provided a basic framework for the Indigenous learning process. The medicine wheel represents an interconnected system of teachings to learn about the seasons, directions, elements, colors, cycle of life, and so much more. So now we've looked at the first 3 teachings of the medicine wheel, which are number 1, the deep connection to all aspects of life. 2, the circle and the balance that it represents. And 3, that it is a learning tool for passing on knowledge. The 4th medicine wheel teaching is that the number 4 is not only the 4 sections, but a sacred number. Many tribal people, whether from North America or from all across the world have the number 4 as a sacred, spiritual, or meaningful number. The number 4 connects so many aspects of life that it's easy to start noticing these connections once you start looking for them. This commonality and similarity that our belief system has with so many other cultures, backgrounds, and ethnicities confirms that all people of the world are truly brothers and sisters of a sort. In ceremony, the 4 directions are very important due to the connection of the 4 cycles of life. Many teachings point to the 4 colors on the medicine wheel to resemble specific directions, life cycles, seasons, or elements. For example, the colors can represent different groups of people on the earth, which I love because it represents diversity. And the colors can also represent the seasons or the elements as well. The 5th medicine wheel teaching is that it is a system of teachings built into one. The medicine wheel is an interconnected system of teachings that guides Indigenous people to live in balance, positivity, and respect all creation on Mother Earth. The system of teachings connect the 4 colors on the medicine wheel with specific directions, life cycles, seasons, etc. But there are different teachings behind each color as each of them matches a specific direction, season, element, or something else that matches with the significant number 4. Even the placement.
I'm going to stop there. I think you got the idea, and I did talk a little bit about some of that stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop share on that, and I'm also going to, sorry, I'll stop recording too.